Oh, Hyrule Warriors, could you really be serious this time around? Right after the announcement of Hyrule Warriors' Age of Imprisonment, in the press release no less, was a description that contained one word, and yet a word with huge potential significance if it is indeed true. Here is the full quote. Fans of the Legend of Zelda series and players of both The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom can experience the thrill of battle and this canonical tale featuring Princess Zelda, King Rauru, and other familiar characters. Fight for Hyrule's future when Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment comes to Nintendo Switch 2 this winter. Canonical tale. Well, that is pretty much the whole ball of wax. However, before I go further, let me just warn of spoilers ahead for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. So if you still wish to play this game, please step away now and do check out some of my other videos if you are in that boat. To me, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was an incredibly exciting title, and I was thrilled when it was announced in the autumn of 2020. I had skipped previous Warriors titles, but this one seemed like an absolute must-buy, with the gorgeous world of the Hyrule of the Wild being resurrected and new lore being added. As I played it, I was delighted by how well the shallow yet still fun gameplay mechanics complemented the intense situation. Battling vast hordes of enemies was very different as an experience from the mainline Zelda titles, and yet felt not just fun, but hugely immersive, giving the great sense of the scale of the Age of Calamity. Having new story elements and getting to spend time with the champions made it all the sweeter. And yet, as we know, Hyrule Warriors took a narrative pivot. It did tease that this was going to be likely due to time travel elements being seeded very early in the game, but nevertheless, as the game reaches its final moments, we learn that this story tells a quite different storyline than the narrative which forms the backdrop of Breath of the Wild. As that pesky Zelda timeline is so wont to do, it's branched into another area and we get a more optimistic outcome for the fates of the people in this Age of Calamity. Now, many will say, why not do that? That's what Zelda games do, and this is a way to give a surprise happy ending. It might also be said that, of course, Warriors games, which are fan-pleasing endeavours, would provide such a triumphant ending. It's also true that it would be the odd holiday Nintendo game that honoured the original story. Perhaps they feared little Jimmy opening his copy of Hyrule Warriors at 6 AM and then being in tears by 6 PM as nigh on every character he loved in the game lay dead. But you know what? I don't think so. Personally, for me, that world of Breath of the Wild is so meaningful and special. In particular, the Great Plateau feels so homely because it was the location that was explored for such a long period. Hours sunk into finding every nook and cranny and experiencing Hyrule as new and learning its ways without anything to go by and figuring out how to progress. In Tears of the Kingdom, the extremely dark turn the Great Plateau had taken struck me as more chilling than most elements of the narrative, and yet this just made the world all the more immersive. Age of Calamity did have the option to tell a story that was vast and tragic and yet all the more powerful because of it. Imagine that final section using this storyline. Imagine fighting a battle so utterly devastating that Link survives but is mortally injured. Imagine that final trek across the Great Plateau, a land we know so well by now, and into the Shrine of Resurrection. Imagine in those final moments the story ending not just with a tragedy, but with, to be continued in, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Even little Jimmy might dry his tears and focus instead on nagging parents for the next game in the series. Dark cliffhanger endings have long been big after all, from Empire Strikes Back to Avengers Endgame, and the prequel format of Age of Calamity was ready-made for such a finale. The idea was so tantalizing, so emotionally gripping and compulsive that it seemed like a surefire success. And yet, they botched it. It's not that Age of Calamity's ending was bad, it's that 4 or so years on, I literally can't even remember what it is. It just didn't have that much impact on me. Now, I have future plans to deep dive Nintendo's philosophy around narratives in gameplay, but suffice to say that I don't think generally it's all that crucial for these games to have traditional narratives as we like to talk about them. But this is an Amiga 4 side game for the Legend of Zelda series with a gameplay mechanic that is kind of plug and play. The differentiating feature of these titles is not that they're enacting a type of Warriors gameplay mechanic that couldn't even have been dreamt of before, but rather that the settings and the narrative they provide are different and therefore utilize these game mechanics in a new context. To be clear, I really enjoyed Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and this just made the choice to have it completely fail as a prequel so frustrating and disappointing. And it wasn't like they went out of their way to flag this ahead of time. Arguably, they couldn't do so as it would be a huge spoiler. In retrospect, there are hints. The Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity page exhorts you to play as Link and Zelda, along with Impa and the 4 champions of Hyrule as they try to stop the kingdom from being brought to ruin by Calamity Ganon. Together, battle against the encroaching darkness and rewrite the kingdom's destiny. Rewrite the kingdom's destiny is a pretty clear indication that this game would not involve the kingdom's original destiny. Which brings us back to the term canonical. In theory, this should be unambiguous. We will get the full story of the imprisoning war in canon to Tears of the Kingdom. But of course, as we've established, Zelda lore is tricky and canon can involve multiple branching pathways. Are they just covering up another late-game confidence trick where we branch into yet another path? At the severe risk of being fooled twice, I'm going to say no. First of all, I don't think I was by any means alone in finding the narrative choices of Age of Calamity underwhelming, and the Zelda team is far more responsive to player feedback than many of Nintendo's teams. They pivoted 180 degrees almost from Skyward Sword's approach to create Breath of the Wild, and although I know that the Tears of the Kingdom temples were still not as well received as Dungeons Gone By, I think the team genuinely did try to incorporate region-specific aesthetics to bring back the features people liked. Secondly, they don't need to make too drastic a change. The imprisoning war was, after all, an incident which eventually resulted in a positive outcome, and so a happy ending can be baked in. Little Jimmy is spared trauma once again. But there are other temptations that may be exerted on the developers. This is a story entirely set in the past, with Zelda herself as a time traveller. This means that we won't have Link holding up the fort, and sure enough, with Echoes of Wisdom, they have established Zelda as a lead character in her own right, to the point where I don't think I saw any mention of the fact that the Age of Imprisonment trailer had no sign of Link. But can you honestly imagine Koei Tecmo resisting the urge to put Link into such a game? I personally think there's a strong, maybe 70% chance that the title will have playable Link, and under these circumstances, I can only hope that it's as extra DLC, or else there's some kind of narrative gimmick that keeps it broadly in line with Tears of the Kingdom. It's perfectly possible they could just say this is one of the imprisoning wars from a different era, because hey, the Zelda canon has enough of them, and they're not all linkless. I only put percentages on my judgment to get a sense over time of how well I anticipate Nintendo's moves and calibrate accordingly, and this is an impossible one to call on a statistical basis, but my feeling is that it's 70% likely that the story will fit in to the contours of Tears of the Kingdom, with a little bit of squeezing and shoving and perhaps a little eccentricity around the edges to make some fun stuff work, but I think it will fit into the backstory of Tears of the Kingdom without requiring a new timeline branch to exist. I will check out Age of Imprisonment because I do love the world, but to be honest, there is one Warriors game I really want to see, but which seems still like such an impossible ask. Or at least it would be. Unless. Here's a thought I almost dare not speak into the world, but we know that 2027 will see the Zelda movie, and we can anticipate a lot of Zelda goodness before then. What if 2027 sees the release of a game by the catchy name of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Dawn of Darkness? This would be the Wild Timeline version of the Age of Calamity ending, an alternative pathway through the narrative that shows exactly how Calamity connects to Breath of the Wild. Not only would this be the most fan-pleasing move ever, even if just measured by how much it pleases this particular fan, but it would be a fantastic way to revive the already successful Age of Calamity game and make a tetralogy of titles: Age of Imprisonment, Age of Calamity, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. Possibly Nintendo could even sell them as a special boxed set, the Hero of the Wild games as one cohesive narrative arc. On the other hand, this seems like such a desperate fan pipe dream that I have to downplay the chances, and yet the more I think about it, the more sense it seems to make. Plus, game expansions are likely to be successful, and it makes sense for Age of Calamity to get one. There aren't many other nuances to be added to the title apart from the one so many people want and the development timeline would fit. If Age of Imprisonment releases, let's say February of 2026, which is about as late as it could likely go while still being classed as winter, Amiga Force would have a year to do a pack of DLC for, let's say, February 2027. Even if they ducked the movie, this could still be a good shout for a later in life return to the Hyrule Warriors franchise. This is clearly a profitable niche for the companies, and with the next Zelda not likely to drop for many years yet, it could be a long time before they get to do another full Hyrule Warriors title. An Age of Calamity revisitation could be just the thing to keep people on the Link train. I feel like a plus game revisitation of the Age of Calamity ending is, let's be bold and say, 30%? Crazy? Probably. A wild fan hope? Almost certainly. But for now at least, I will hold a candle of optimism. Do check out the videos on screen or the Patreon below. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.